not shut down because of COVID-20, because of COVID. I mean, and how many people remember the Red for Ed walkouts? And how many, and there's a lot of things I actually had in between those, but then, you kind of go further back, say, okay, how many people remember, the passage of Prop 301, and how many people remember implementation of statewide student achievement testing, and all of the different tests that we've had since then, and DSEG orders, and
Hey guys, it's 10 o'clock.
Is it 10 o'clock already?
Yes.
Where's Sean?
I don't know. Jessica, are you going to be ready to do this gig on your own?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we can start without him.
Well, we could do introductions.
You want to give a couple
He'll pop in at the last minute. He usually does.
Okay. Let's wait maybe a minute.
How many people do we have in the waiting room?
12. 2 of them are Otter AIs. Actually, there's 14. 2 of them are AI.
Okay.
So.
Did you want to set me up as a co-host so I can help let them in, or?
Yes, please. Oh no, for some reason I can't make you a co-host. I have to make you the host. That's so strange.
Well, if you make me the host, do you remain the host?
No.
Huh. So it'll only have one host now?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got to look at my settings and figure out why that is. That's kind of strange. We've got 16. You guys ready to rock and roll?
Yes.
Okay.
So who's going to be, does Jessica have a deck that she wants to share? Does she have the authority to share it? Okay.
Yep, I checked that.
Okay.
All right. Oh, there's Sean. I'm gonna admit him first. All right. Full contingent.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Sean.
Sorry about that. I had a little trouble connecting.
No worries. No worries at all. Just a real quick rundown. Sean and I will get kicked off, introduce ourselves, introduce Diane, and then Sean will introduce the 2 of you, and we'll have you do your presentation. We've got 18 people in the room so far. Hopefully we'll have some more that are joining us. And we like to keep these casual just so that people have a chance to answer questions. Are you okay with them throwing things in the chat and asking as we go, or do you prefer that they wait until the end?
I'm fine with along the way, Jessica.
Yeah, let's ask as they go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are just like worried about holding on their questions and yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead then and let people in, and then we can get started. Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all on a Wednesday morning. We're just letting a few more people into the room. So we'll get started here shortly.
Always didn't like her. A lot of the
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first ARSA Superintendent's Roundtable of the year. Sean and I are really excited to have some time to spend with you this morning, and we look forward to really seeing you throughout the year. Each month we try to do some gathering around the roundtable so that we can talk about things that are important to you, get people to join us that have information that you need, and have conversations that we really need to have to support each other in the work that we do in our rural communities. So we're very glad that you're here. My name is Melissa Sadorf. I'm the Executive Director for the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Sean Rickert.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Sean Rickert. I'm the president of the Arizona Rural Schools Association, also the superintendent of the Pima Unified School District down in Eastern Arizona here in Graham County. And I'm also the chairman of the Arizona, well, the Accountability Technical Advisory Committee, which works with our two, guests today, to try to help develop, refine, and implement the state's accountability system. Really, it's been a great pleasure of mine to get to work with both Sean Ross, who's the executive director of the state board, and Jessica Mueller, who's a policy analyst for the state board. I don't know exactly what her official title is. It's changed a number of times since we first started working together quite a while back on accountability. But we know that this time of year, as we're refining our plan to get from here to the what Senator Sylvia Allen used to refer to as the dam test in April, having a sense for where we're at is important, and the state has worked to try to develop that through the accountability system. And so we hope that this is something which is timely and on people's minds. We also know that Sean and Jessica have some interesting changes that are happening in the accountability system over the next 2 years. This process they're going to describe, and so we want to give them an opportunity to share that with you. Also, they're eager for your feedback. So if you have questions for them or about the topic in general, please feel free to put them into the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we'll call on people and try to keep this, again, as round table as possible. We love the Zoom meeting because it enables us rural educators to get together in a way that would otherwise require hours and hours of driving. But before we jump into Sean and Jessica, I also want to recognize that Diane Smith, our policy consultant, is also here with us. Thank you, Diane, and she'll be also participating in the conversation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Sean.
Yes, thank you so much for the warm welcome from Melissa, Sean, and Diane, and inviting us to join you today for this presentation. We've been giving a lot of presentations about A through F lately, and this is typical for us every August coming into the fall and the school year. But there's some new information in here as well. But always we like to start with giving the background information so that it's always front of mind of what the formulas of the A through F model are and the systems that underlie it. So first, the accountability system is designed to measure schools' academic performance by assigning letter grades. The indicators by statute must be defined as academically relevant indicators. And what we know about the A through F letter grade system is that it does not capture all of the work that schools are putting into helping their students grow. But it does capture those academic related indicators. So first we have the A through F principles of agreement that were adopted by the board in 2014. We discussed these at length in our board retreat yesterday with all of our board members. And we were trying to figure out with them, this is a decade-old document. How do we feel about the philosophical agreements, those technical agreements, and those implementation agreements here? The general consensus is that the board would like to look into those philosophical agreements again, look at the data and see if all schools have had the potential to achieve that A summative letter grade, to identify if it is really recognizing academic growth. And we're going to start to bring that to the board to review and to have those discussions about that using a very data-driven approach. When we were speaking with them, the technical and implementation agreements they felt were still very consistent, that they're on board with, and that they feel that the board is doing a good job of executing with the community. Do I have any questions right now about these philosophical agreements, technical agreements, and implementation agreements?
I'm not seeing any, Jessica.
Awesome, thank you. So first, there are three major bodies that are involved in the development and ongoing continuous improvement of the A through F accountability system. The State Board of Education sets annual cut scores, typically every October, because by statute, the letter grades must be released by November 1st by the Department of Education. The State Board also approves the accountability models and the business rules underlying those models, and it reviews the letter grade appeals that are submitted once those letter grades have been issued by the Department of Education. The Department of Education then manages all the data collection with schools, updating any data and really fielding a lot of those data requests from schools. It calculates the annual achievement profiles, and a lot of this information is then added onto the school report cards, which by statute, the Department of Education designs and issues. They also present a lot of this information and ongoing data about what's happening with the A through F accountability system to the board. And ongoing every month, what we have are what we call the technical advisory committees. There are 3 technical advisory committees, one for alternative 9-12 schools, one for the traditional K-12 schools, and one that's really looking at the AOI schools and the business rules that are applied to AOI schools. And these are the online schools that are approved by the board and by the charter board. The tasks in these public meetings that are held monthly are evaluating the models and receiving data from the department and board about the models and their performance, and then providing these technical and policy recommendations to the board. This is required by statute that the board appoints these members and that they provide these recommendations to the board when they're approving and adopting the accountability models. Does this clarify anything for everybody? Anybody that there was some confusion about in the field? Awesome, hearing none. I'm going to just briefly go over the overview of how the letter grades are determined. The system includes multiple indicators, academic performance through proficiency, growth, and graduation rates, as well as college readiness. This summative letter grade is applied across all of these indicators. And these are the approved 2023-2024 A through F letter grade models. In K-8, we see that growth is 50% of the model. In 9-12, this is 20% of the model. And alternative schools do not have this test-based growth measure. Instead of that, they have growth to graduation, which is 30% of the model. This factors in things like the student reaching credits on time, being on time to graduate, as well as their persistence year over year. Then we have proficiency in each of the models as required by statute. This is 30% in K-8, 30% in 9-12, and 15% in alternative 9-12. English learners is also required by statute and is across all the models at 10%, with that being 5% of English language proficiency, and then that English language learner growth from reassessment. In the 9-12 model, graduation is 20%, and in the alternate model, this is 10%. And then what we also have in K-8 is acceleration readiness, which is a menu of different measures, including chronic absenteeism, inclusion within the classroom for special education students, subgroup improvement, as well as accelerating students to on 3rd grade reading level, as well as advancing them in grade 8 math. These have been very stable over the past few years. Not many changes to the percentages that are assigned to each indicator, as well as the underlying measurement of the indicator. Now, that was a lot of information. So I was just wondering if at this point, anybody had questions.
Feel free to unmute if you want to do that. And if not, it doesn't look like they have any questions at this time, Jessica.
All right, I will move forward then to more of the new information for us to announce, since a lot of that was just foundational that's been in place with the board and the department for many years. This time I'll invite Sean Ross to help me present on the indicator scoring and the framework that we've been presenting thus far with the technical advisory committees, as well as the board receiving this presentation on this Monday board meeting that we had held.
Hey, Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
So one question that came up before we jump into that, though, the question was how is the grade impacted if a school does not have any EL students, any English language learner students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what happens if the school does not have the required N size of the student population, which across the indicators is 10 students? They would have this removed from the denominator of their accountability letter grade. And so they would not be held accountable to this indicator of English language learners. And then their denominator might shrink from that 100% to that 90%, given that the EL indicator is 10%. And so that removes it from being something that they're measured by. And this is all information that they would be able to find in ADE Connect, and they would just see that there is no figures presented in that EL indicator. And if there's any questions about how that process works, I can definitely connect you with the folks at the Department of Education to help with understanding that beautiful purple screen in ADE Connect.
So, right, so when you say 10 students, I mean, so that'd be, if they don't have 10 EL students that are tested, then they also would, they just wouldn't receive those. So basically they'd be scored out of 90 points instead of out of 100 points. So
Correct.
if they got all the other points, they'd have 100%, not 90%.
Yep, absolutely. So, thank you. So what indicator scoring is this requirement in statute that governs the A through F accountability system, which is 15241. This is in subsection G, and I've bolded the aspect that indicates this indicator scoring. And what it states here is that the A through F letter grade system shall be applied to each performance indicator of the annual achievement profile prescribed in subsection D of this section, and the state board shall assign an overall letter grade for the public school or local education agency. And so what this tells us is that that letter grade system of A through F is applied to each of those indicators, as well as the overall letter grade remaining and being one part of the A through F accountability system. In another slide, I'm going to share what those subsection D indicators are and what it calls for in statute, and what we've sort of mapped it to based on the indicators that are approved by the board. So here is that slide that I was speaking about. So on the left column, we have what subsection D states, and the numbering here is wrong, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 different indicators within that subsection D. The first indicator we have here is really that test-based performance indicator. This is what we have for proficiency and growth. When we have not had the growth metric in 912, this is where subgroup improvement was substituted in, which was the process in the school year 22-23, as well as 18-19. This is also where growth to graduation shows up for those 9-12 alternative schools. In that second one, we have proficiency across the board. And the third is our English learner requirement. With the fourth one, it's college and career readiness. Very, very clear right there. Not hard to interpret that one. In the fifth one, we have the menu of assessments. So this was included later on when that statute was expanded as a separate indicator, just to ensure that that is represented. And that would be proficiency as well. The sixth one is the fuzziest, I would say, of each of those subsection indicators. It's multiple measures of educational performance or other relevant indicators of school quality, such as graduation rates and attendance rates. So right now, what we know about acceleration readiness is that it is intended to mirror the college and career readiness in some ways. And it's intended to bring in a few other indicators of school quality, but because it isn't so clear in that we don't have attendance separated from acceleration readiness, for now we have it excluded from K-8 from receiving a letter grade. And that's the direction that we're going in, and we'll try to work through that with our technical advisory committees to see what will happen with acceleration readiness as far as the indicator letter grades. But the current recommendation that I think you're presenting to the board is just going to be for graduation rate in the 912 model. So this is probably the newest part of the information. Are there any questions that anybody wants to share in chat or to speak with us about?
The number 5, the menu of assessments for the K-8 business rules proficiency.
Good point. So in that one, we'll look through the statute and make sure that there's no part in that statute that includes K-8 schools. And if it doesn't, we'll remove that from this chart. That's great feedback. Thank you so much.
I saw a question in the chat about cut scores. So the schedule for letter grade is pretty much the same every year. The department will provide a presentation to the board in the September board meeting on cut scores. The recommendations from those cut scores will come from the technical advisory committees, including the one led by Superintendent Rickert. So the technical advisory committees make recommendations on cut scores. Those recommendations go to the board in a presentation in September, and then we get another presentation in October where the board actually votes on the cut scores. And the rationale for that is funny and maybe is not widely known to folks. So we like to share this because sometimes we'll get questions like, why don't they just do it earlier? Why don't they do it all at once? So the reason we have a presentation in September and then a vote in October is because school letter grades are embargoed until cut scores have been voted on by the board. So if the board were to vote earlier or to establish cut scores earlier, you all could be FOIA'd. And this did happen once in the past, which is why this change was made for your letter grades prior to the widespread release. And so actually at the request of schools and districts, this is the pattern we follow so that the board votes on cut scores in the October meeting on that Monday. And most typically, and I think, I don't know that it's ever happened differently, but most typically letter grades are released by that Friday. So that's why that schedule is in place.
Yeah, thank you so much, Executive Director Ross. And that Monday through Friday timeline is also an effort to, schools will know on Monday what their letter grade will be. They'll be able to work on communications, and then the media won't have that public record until that Friday, and that puts us into the weekend. And so it kind of gives a little bit of buffer time for you all to work within your communities to communicate that messaging. With the question on, are we anticipating a change in cut scores? The committees have currently only seen and reviewed the information for the 9-12 model. So no discussion has happened on the K-8 model. But as we know, those models have been consistent. The business rules are consistent. And the discussion has typically been to retain those prior year cut scores so that we have a measure of schools over time and how they're progressing on their measures. So not changing it up year to year on them and creating more of a continuous system of evaluation for the school. And I see that the Superintendent Rickert might want to chime in about this. I'm happy to hear.
Thanks. No, one of the principles of agreement, I mean, going all the way back to 2014 and 2016, was the idea that through the accountability system, the state board could establish incentives for school districts. And that meant that they wanted schools to be able to say, okay, gosh, if we make these adjustments, it will lead to an improvement in our letter grade. The only way that can be accomplished is if you have consistent data from one year to the next. And so with that being sort of that foundational logic, the state board has generally been supportive of maintaining consistency in cut scores unless there's a dramatic change in a part of the business rules that would change the overall distribution, that would cause a school that was an A school to become a B school. In which case then they look at, okay, do we need to renorm those cut scores to preserve a school's placement and their rank in lieu of to avoid those changes causing a school to go from an A to a C. So that's kind of the logic behind the recommendations that the ATAC has made to the state board, and that's been a large part of why we've generally, if you can look back, you can see where there have been changes in cut scores. But for the most part, the effort has been to keep those cut scores stable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that very effectively, Superintendent Rickert. Appreciate that. So we know that from Superintendent Rickert, actually, that the initial design of this aspect of indicator letter grades strongly influenced by the insights of the district leaders that were pursuing and sponsoring this statute when it developed. We're hoping that with the indicator letter grades, the schools will be able to communicate those areas where the summative letter grade isn't showing that they're really exceeding. So maybe you have an English language learner program that is really serving those kids well, and you might receive that A letter grade, but because it's only 10% of the overall summative model, it's not accounting for a ton of points in your summative system. So you might be at that B in your summative system, depending on how you're performing on other indicators, but we know and we can see that an English language learner might be an A. And so it also provides benchmarking to see on the indicator where the school is performing relative to other schools on the indicator, depending on how those cut scores are set. So what this means is that if there is maybe a C or a D in graduation rate, school will now be able to put that C or D on it instead of looking at a number and not knowing how that compares or what that means across the state. It gives them a way to look and establish a system to move that D or C up into maybe a B or higher over the years. And so what is going to stay the same, and what we want to make very clear, is that the statute continues to call for an overall summative letter grade, and that this is still what the school will be held accountable to for processes like the charter board, processes like the school improvement, is that summative system. What will change is that these indicator letter grades will then be appealable to the state board. And I'm very excited about that aspect because there's been a lot of times where we have not been able to approve a letter grade appeal because it doesn't make a change to that summative letter grade. But what we do know is that that indicator point value is not accurately measuring the school because the appeal would be approved. And so the school might be able to see a change in that indicator letter grade that they're able to advocate for in the appeals that might not change the summative, but it would change that indicator, and they could then report that to their communities. The indicator letter grades are then to be reported on school report cards, and this is going to be a lot of where we work on the development of that with our communities and getting feedback from you all on what will actually help you communicate, since we know that school report cards are being used most often by parents and media consultants and other experts. Is there anything you'd like to add here, Shanas?
No, I actually, I think probably getting to the timeline will be helpful just to be able to explain. Yeah, I knew that was coming next. So I'll go ahead and I can field this one, Jessica. So we've talked a lot about the coming of indicator scoring, but we want to make sure to let you all know that we know that this is a pronounced change in the reporting in the system. And even though it is driven by statute, the goal of this is to give more transparency, more actionable data for schools and communities. But we definitely heard concerns from schools as we first started discussing this about timeline, about wanting enough time to really sort of think and plan and needing some resources to help roll this out effectively. And so this timeline was built in conjunction with our technical advisory committees, vetted by the technical advisory committees. And then we did a large stakeholder group meeting. Diane was there, and where we ran through this again and asked for questions. And so we feel pretty comfortable that this has addressed the concerns that can be addressed by the board. I know some folks have concerns with the statute. That's out of our purview, but this is the part we do have some control over. So as far as timeline goes, we are, making the big announcement now. So Jessica, Sean Smith, and I presented at the August board meeting this past Monday. And then we're doing a little road show just like today with groups to go and present and discuss. The board will vote on cut scores for the indicators in the December board meeting. Now, I just want to be really careful. This is separate from the letter grade release that's going to happen in October. The letter grade release for this year will happen in October. that will only include the summative letter grade. The indicator scores, the indicator letter grades will not be coming until the October 2025 letter grade release. So just to put you at ease, if you didn't know that you do have a year to plan. So during that year, again, the board will vote on cut scores for each indicator. Those will be recommended by the technical advisory committees. The department is actually going to release through ADE Connect the last 3 years of data to schools, what their indicator scores, indicator grades would have been for the past 3 years. And they're going to release that only to schools so that they can see what their data would have looked like, what their trends may be, and they can get comfortable with what those indicator letter grades, just the appearance of them, the feel of them, the idea behind them, and that will be an asset, we think, in helping develop their communication plans before the letter grades are released publicly. The board and the department will also be working together on resources, kind of short videos, one-pagers, recorded webinars, those kinds of things, to explain indicator scoring and to help discuss indicator scoring with different audiences. And then in October of 2025, and I want to really stress that, the forthcoming letter grade release this October, just summative letter grades. The October 25 letter grade release will be the first one that has the summative letter grade and the indicator letter grades. And then, as always, and you'll see more of this in forthcoming slides, the technical advisory committees will look at the data. This is something they do regularly. They meet every month. They'll look at the data from those letter grades for summative and indicator. They'll examine it. They'll use it as a lever by which to examine the overall system and to make, changes where appropriate to improve the system. So this is the timeline, and we hope this puts you at some ease, knowing that you do have over a year at this point before this comes into place.
Any questions? It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot because.
I did put a question in the chat.
Oh.
When the indicator scores come out, will K-8 only have proficiency growth, proficiency in English learners? So 3 indicators for K-8 schools?
Yeah, that's currently where we're headed for that first year of 24-25, given that acceleration readiness has a lot of things to weed out that we don't have enough time to get through for that first year, but we think that we're making a good faith effort with the legislature to come into compliance with the statute by implementing, 90% of the model having an indicator letter grade.
Thank you.
We also think it'll help in being able to effectively communicate it, because we know acceleration readiness is one of the harder indicators to communicate with everyone because it has so much going on within it. So we're hoping we can address some of those things when we come to a letter grade for it. So every month, those technical advisory committees are meeting, and we're planning to use a lot of these indicator letter grades to continue to refine the overall system as well as the indicators themselves. That trend data that all the schools are going to get within that January to February-ish period next year, this will be information that the technical advisory committee members, which sign a non-disclosure agreement, will have access to see what trends are happening so that they can use that information to inform improving the system overall. And what they would look for is, big swings and jumps across indicators in schools that wouldn't be anticipated, and trying to explain perhaps why that's happening. We're currently thinking about the indicator letter grades, and what it's helped us dive into is that on September 3rd, we're going to have a special study session on proficiency and growth, which represent the majority of the model. These materials from this meeting will be public, and we'll be able to get that to you as well through Melissa and Sean. So future actions and sort of kind of what's expected of LEAs, state board, and department. There's no new data that will be submitted by local education agencies. This is all information that the department already has. It's really on the technical advisory committees, the department and the board, to come to cut scores on those figures that are already in AD Connect based on the data schools are reporting. The local education agencies, as stated before, will be able to submit appeals based on those indicators, and we'll be really working through the appeals policies and procedures to try to make this as effective and smooth as possible. And we've ironed out a lot of things over the years with the letter grade appeals process, and we're always looking to get feedback on how we can continue to improve that. Process doesn't change as much for the State Board or Department of Education, besides then setting cut scores on the indicators as well as that summative. Because the cycle is a little bit disrupted for that first year, it'll be the December, as Sean was stating, for the indicator letter grades, but maybe in the following year, we'll be able to bring indicator letter grades and summative letter grades to being voted on at the same time in that October 2026 meeting. So Sean already went over the resources that we're working through. What's not on here that he addressed is that we're thinking about different audiences for these resources, what we can provide to parents, what we can provide to principals, and what we can provide to other members of the field that might have questions about A through F letter grades. And what we've seen in other states is a lot of 2 to 5 minute videos about each indicator for different audiences. And this has been something that they've received a lot of good feedback about implementing in their states to help people understand what the indicators are measuring. We're going to continue to hold listening sessions like this and engaging with the field to think about what resources and questions that you're having that we need to iron out. So this is one of our last slides, just reiterating the timeline where we have some major decisions happening in the December 2024 board meeting, and then the major release of those indicator letter grades in October 2025. With last couple minutes, we'll go over the takeaways, and then I want to just discuss the appeals process for this year and address some of the changes coming up. The summative letter grade and the utility of those summative letter grades is staying the same, even including when the indicator letter grades are released. We're looking for consistency across that summative letter grade and as much across the indicators as we can achieve while we continuously improve those indicators one by one. All of this process is very public, and we try to be as transparent as we can. Our contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation to reach out with any questions you might have about how to access that process or attend those meetings and things that you might need. So the upcoming A through F appeals process allows for schools to challenge their letter grades that are issued if they believe that there are mitigating factors affecting their performance. The grounds for these appeals are incorrect data, adverse testing conditions based on some type of event or disruption that happened during either the English learner assessment, the ELA or math assessments, as well as the grounds for appeal of significant community events. And these could be disruptions due to construction, aspects of weather changes and things like that that have severely impacted learning for the year. So the timeline is the main change that we're going to be proposing to the board for review this year. Schools will continue to be able to submit appeals during the time period ending November 15th. This begins the day that letter grades are released and that form is ready to go. We've communicated months prior about what the policies and procedures are. A draft of what the form questions will be is included in that. And then that usually gives about 3 weeks for schools to submit a letter grade appeals. And we are very available for questions and helping out with us getting those submissions in. The change this year is that typically the State Board of Education has voted on appeal recommendations in the December board meeting. Our December board meeting for the board occurs on the first Monday of December, and this time period being November 15th to December 4th-ish has always been challenging for the appeals committee to review those appeals, come up with recommendations, and then issue those recommendations to the board, while also giving the board ample time to review those appeals that have been submitted. So we are going to propose that this delay for final decision-making happen at the January board meeting, which would then be the last Monday of the month. This is really to create a smoother process of reviewing the appeals, as well as communicating more effectively with schools during that time frame from November 15th to the January meeting. And I think that concludes our presentation. So I have my contact information here. You can also include the inbox if you prefer. But yeah, always happy to help.
Thank you, Jessica and Sean. Really appreciate that information. Does anyone have other questions that they might be able to answer at this time?
Sorry, I'm gonna ask another question.
Do it. Yes,
Sorry. So this year, or this last year, sorry, we were a very rural remote school, and we had 2 students that moved away the Friday before our testing started. And then we had 1 student who on our end showed they submitted the test, but didn't, if your end, it doesn't show that it's submitted, but on our end, it shows it did. So those 3 kids put us below the 95%. 2 were out. We had no control. How much effect does that have on our letter grade? This is the first time we haven't met the 95%.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I'm going to make sure that I get your contact information so I can get you with the Department of Education Chief Accountability Officer, Sean Smith. There are situations that we've even worked through for this 23-24 cycle of letter grades already that relate to the 95% tested penalty. So what he'll be able to do is to see if those 2 or 3 students have an impact on the letter grade and be able to arm you with that information. And then also connect you with the people to possibly get that 1 student's test results included in the letter grade, and answer any other questions about this letter grade.
That would be great. I would love that help. Do you want me to just put my information in the chat?
Yes, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
You can drop your email.
Thank you.
And then, Jessica, could you just, so kind of pulling it out of a specific school example, just speak in general to the 95% and how that, in general, how those points are structured for schools?
Yeah. So the 95% penalty is based on those students that are there that first day of the testing window. And so it is including that student population. And if you're not testing below, if you're testing below 95% of that student population, you do have a penalty to some degree, because it is added into your denominator. What happens is that schools who actually go over 95% do see a boost because the students are still included in the numerator. In the past, this wasn't the case, to where schools didn't really get a bonus for going over 95%. They were really just held accountable to that percentage, but we really want to encourage schools to get as close to 100% as possible. So there could be some benefits to schools now with the way the business rules were revised in the 21-22 school year.
Kristen, when you get that information, if you could share that with the single site administrators in the state, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I will.
We've all faced that issue in the past.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will.
Yeah, it's so helpful to learn where that issue is being faced more than others, and because looking at it statewide, we don't see that impact that you're seeing in your schools, and you're able to share with us.
And if Melissa, hopefully you don't mind, I've known Melissa a long time, so I think she'll forgive me for being presumptuous, but it might be a good idea for your next meeting, Melissa, maybe to invite Sean Smith and Yasin Fahmy from the department, their accountability team, because where Jessica and I are speaking at the policy level, Sean and Yasin are the ones who live in the data and often, not only have those kind of specific questions for sites, but also one of the things that's really great about that team, we're really thankful for Sean and his team there, is they very much go the extra mile to help schools and really work, as much as they can within the system to help schools get all the points that they can and that are available to them. And so, as Jessica said, it's not unusual for schools to reach out and for them to be able to sort of, hopefully find some solutions for them. So it just might be good to get them in front of your group and have them become familiar faces, because they're a great resource in this space.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Sean. Good recommendation.
Can I ask one more question since you're here then too? When you were listing the reason for appeals, would the 95% be a reason for an appeal if it was extenuating circumstances where like 2 kids are, 3% of your population or 4% of your population?
Yeah, the appeals committee has reviewed 95% tested. Most of those appeals were reviewed prior to the change in the business rules, so we haven't set a precedent beyond that change and how the committee and the department would interpret it with this new business rule. But I think that that's something that they try to fix before the letter grade release, as we stated with the Department of Education, and that is all the way up until basically like October 1st or so. They'll do that work for schools, but we can also accept that for review in the appeals process.
I want to say too, I really appreciate that information and even the knowledge of connecting with Sean Smith, because I did email when I saw that we didn't meet the 95% and I didn't get a response that gave me that information to even be able to reach out and ask those questions to him. And I thought I just needed to wait to see what happened. And then was I going to have to appeal or not? I wasn't quite sure.
And just to reinforce what Jessica said, and so you all have your data already. We can't speak to the cut scores for sure because they haven't been voted on, but as Superintendent Rickert said, the trend has been for the cut scores to be prior year. So you can figure out your letter grade already pretty accurately, or at least a good estimate of it. And so if you notice something like this, or you notice a discrepancy, we really do want to encourage you to reach out to Sean and his team. Our goal, and I can't state this enough, our goal is as clean a first letter grade release as possible, because we know it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Once the letter grades come out and it's a C, and then you appeal and then it turns into a B, we know it's a B, you know it's a B, but your community, how far does that permeate? So we want you to get that B up front. We want it to be in that initial release. And so we work really closely with the department, and they have this sort of buffer time, as Jessica said, in September into early October, where there is a lot of outreach to schools to try to fix issues before the letter grade release. And so, yeah, we strongly encourage that because we know it's best for you as well to have that clean, letter grade release up front. So we'll put he won't mind. We'll put Sean Smith's email address in the chat, and that way you can reach out to him directly too.
That would be great. And I know I see the accountability page, and it has I don't think the 95% is going to affect us this year because we're really close and we weren't just over to get a letter grade. So even if it impacts us, it shouldn't change our letter grade. However, on that accountability form, it doesn't indicate what the impact is. So I would really appreciate being able to see, because you didn't get 95%, this is how much is going to be taken off your accountability score. Because I looked at the business rules, I tried to figure that out, and it was not happening. So if it could calculate it, I would really appreciate that.
Thanks, Kristen. Other questions or comments? They're always looking for feedback as well. So that kind of question, Kristen, I'm sure is helpful.
So yeah, I mean, clearly the accountability or the indicator scoring is going to have the potential to shake things up. I mean, if you look at, the state publishes, the list of all the schools and how, there are schools that receive all of the accountability points, have very low proficiency, and get high letter grades. What indicator scoring is going to do is it's going to shine a light inside that black box, kind of like what Kristen's saying. There's a lot of things like, well, okay, you got a letter grade. What does it mean? What is it really saying? That indicator scoring is going to take away some of that mystery, both for us as education leaders who are trying to, craft the path forward for our schools, but also for the public, where the public is going to be, now saying, okay, why do you have, a C for proficiency or a D for proficiency when you've always been a B school, but now I see that basically, most of the students aren't proficient, and what proficient means. And so now, it's going to be on us as education leaders to make sure that we, are well versed. Okay, what does growth mean? What is that value? And yes, having Sean Smith and you see come in and talk, we can have future roundtables to help prepare education leaders for how they address those kinds of questions. We've also done that in the past. How do you understand your growth measures? And then also, as the timeline says, once we get past this first iteration, there's going to need to be some changes, because, if you look at the distribution of growth scores, you see that, the number of schools that get 100% of the points that are, ranked number one, is, I don't want to say ridiculous, but to a point, it's not terribly informative. And so, there's a need there to make some adjustments. And so those adjustments are going to happen, once we get past 25. Well, and coming up with what those solutions could be will probably happen ahead of that, so that we can speak to the problems with solutions. So this is, this is something that's going to affect, education leaders, and how they communicate, to the schools. We know, I know, that having a D label, it's a morale killer. It's a teacher retention killer. It's a hiring killer, and it sure as heck doesn't do anything for your ability to compete in an education marketplace with micro schools and charter schools and, all the other forces out there. Kristen, what do you got?
I'm sorry if I keep monopolizing, but I'm going to ask since you're here. For the indicator scoring, when the new data came out for the comprehensive needs assessment that showed your poverty level and how you compared to other schools at that poverty level, I really appreciated that, because at least it was comparing apples to apples. Is the indicator scoring we're like 97% free and reduced. Is our indicator scoring for proficiency going to just be, a C compared to the schools that have really high proficiency? Or is it going to be in like a graph similar to the CNA data, where it compares you to other schools that are more similar to what you have?
Yeah, that's part of what we're starting to review on September 3rd on proficiency and growth. Sean and Yason both work with the individual on federal accountability that has built those systems. Russell Potter has created a lot of those graphs that go into the CNA. And so they've been informed by his work there, and they've explored the data. And so that's up to the accountability technical advisory committees to review it and determine if that is measuring proficiency in a way that is consistent with their understanding and intent over the years. And maybe the intent has to evolve, as Sean Rickert was saying, in 25, 26, and going forward to something that another feedback that was given as well is to maybe share on the indicator how many students were measured by that indicator, to really show that, this 10% of the letter grade that's EL could be 11 kids out of a school that's 500 or so, and something like that could really help with communication, we've heard. So those are all ideas that are being factored into sort of those resources and how the department can program them into tools for the schools to use.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify the kind of the board versus the department. As far as the board is concerned, it's the agency that releases the letter grade. So that's going to kind of be the extent of what the board does. But the department houses report cards and then does the CNAs. So it, we will absolutely pass this on to Sean and his team, that would be a desire. And I would think if they've done that, like Jessica was saying, if they've done that for the summative letter grades, then I would assume there would be a willingness to do that level of reporting for the indicators. But that would be housed just kind of solely in the department.
Other questions, comments, other input?
If I could just take a second.
Please, thank you, Cole.
First of all, thank you so much for being here and listening. I think, when we talk about assessment, there's both positives and negatives to it, but and this may not be the forum, but I think the reporting that we get from the testing in order to monitor and drive instruction, back when it was AZ Merit, we got right down to the standard, and we're able to then in August start in on monitoring that instruction, providing interventions. The reporting that we get out of AASA is minimal at best. And so it's very difficult to use that as an instrument to drive instruction and meet the needs of our kids. It's more of an indicator of who's not. You either have the haves or the have-nots is what it separates us into. So if there's any possible, as the state board looks at what the testing system, we can't purchase the least reporting measure when it comes to being able to provide feedback to our teachers so that they can then intervene early. When you make decisions in October based on clustered standards, it handicaps us. Is my only thought.
No, that's super helpful, Superintendent Young. So the sort of history behind that is there aren't enough questions on the exam to drill down to the standard level. And when the suggestion has been made historically to increase the number of items on the exam so that it can drill down to a standard level to give more actionable data to families and schools, there was a lot of political resistance at the time to adding items to the assessment. However, I know Superintendent Horn has been talking about this pretty publicly recently about a desire to increase the detail in the reporting to give more actionable data to you all and to communities. And so I think that comment is great. I think it's been very much heard. The current contract, the board approves the vendor for the assessment. The RFP for it is sort of written and overseen by the department. So I know just from Superintendent Horn's comments, he is looking into the ability to change the reporting that we get, you all get from Pearson for that exam. So yeah, that has been heard loud and clear by the department. And I think I can't speak for them. It's a different agency, but I think Superintendent Horn would be comfortable with me saying they are taking steps to try to move to that direction, because there is a pretty universal desire to give more actionable data. So yeah, very, very good.
No, I appreciate that, Sean. And at one time we did have it when we had AZ Merit.
Oh yeah,
to do it and then get to the cluster. So, whether it's the publisher of the test, whether that's Pearson and whoever might be looking at that RFP, but that should definitely be part of the rubric when identifying how we can actually use the data to be actionable with our kids so we can make that difference instead of we're playing darts in the dark, and that's not okay. But held accountable to the grades.
Thanks, Cole.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other last minute thoughts? We've got 2 minutes before we wrap up here. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Well, I'd like to thank our guests today, Jessica and Sean. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. We appreciate it. Just so that you know, they are also going to be doing a breakout session at the ARSA annual conference. And so it'll be this information and more, and then obviously an opportunity to interact with them in person about some of the questions that you might be having in a month. So just know that they are going to be available both to you through the email, but also at the annual conference. So again, thank you both for being here today. Sean, any last minute items that you need to bring to the table?
Nope.
All right, then.
We'll get this video on the ARSA YouTube channel and linked up on the ARSA website, and the presentation materials will be attached there, and we'll get it all archived for you so you can refer back to all the wonderful and witty things that were said. And look forward to seeing you all soon.
Melissa and Sean, I just want to say thank you for having us. This relationship is really important to us. And, like I said, we've known Melissa for years, Sean and Diane, and this is a group we value, and we value your feedback. And just please do know this door is open, and we really would love to hear from you all. So thank you so much for letting us be a part of the meeting.
Our pleasure. Thank you. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of the day and hope to see you at the annual conference October 1st through 3rd up in Flagstaff. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day. Thank you.